addressing his audience, you can see that he was addressing as kind of like the father of our country, and then he was addressing as the leader of the free world. And one was a little bit more stern, and one was a little bit more, supportive. And so that was kind of proof that he understood who his audience was. Okay, and then the P stood for?
Purpose.
Cheaters. So purpose, yeah. And there could be more than one purpose of a speech or of of an advertisement or so. A lot of times advertisements obviously to sell their product. But sometimes it's, maybe to convince you to send money. Other times it's, for this particular speech, there was a lot of purposes. He wanted to put the Congress on notice that they're going to be working towards policy right now. He wanted to put the world stage on notice that, hey, we're not going to tolerate this. We don't know what's going on exactly, but we're going to figure it out. He wanted to ensure the American people that they were to be safe. There are a lot of different purposes in this speech, and each one he kind of was like a checklist. Okay. And what does the second S stand for? Syntax.
T-A-X. You got S-Y-N-T-A-X. Yeah.
Syntax. Which we had discussed, there are several ways of finding or utilizing syntax. One, and I think the most important, is word choice. When you choose specific words to convey a message. Sometimes your syntax is, your word choice might be, let's say, condescending. Like, what if somebody comes in and I'm like, oh, you're late again. And I'm condescending. I'm just teasing you guys, because you're on time. But that condescending tone in my voice or whatever is another way of conveying syntax. Because I chose my words. I chose the way that I said them in a way that downplayed, kind of hurt somebody's feelings kind of thing, trying to do, yeah.
Isn't the tone part of the syntax?
It is. Tone and syntax usually go together. Because tone of voice, what if I were to go, have a very simplistic tone and say things like, okay, right? And so then you wouldn't expect me to quote Shakespeare. If I had that kind of dipsy-boxy. So tone and syntax, they're very, very closely related. And then, so word choice is one. You could have, like I say, you could have a very eloquent syntax. You can have a very simplistic syntax. You can have anything in between. You can have, what is it when you're upset at somebody and the verbiage isn't there?
Demanding?
Yeah, you could have
Demanding, demeaning.
You could have a very demanding, but that comes into word choice again. Okay? And finally, tone. And tone is attitude, right? And those two words, attitude, is synonymous. It's your attitude toward the subject. And again, you have to have evidence. You have to show evidence of tone in your writing or in your speech. And so, because especially in writing, a person can't hear the condescension. They can't hear, if I go, oh, I'm so mad at you. You guys are going to walk out the door and go, okay, we're fine. But if I'm like, I'm so ticked off right now, I can't even see straight, you better get out of my face. Totally different tone, but it's just how you can hear it in my voice. Whereas if I write it down, I'm mad at you, you're like, okay, can I just text them and make everything better? Bat my eyes and makes everything better, right? So you can't read tone as well. So there has to be evidence there of tone. You have to be able to find that evidence. And a lot of times it is implicit or implied by things that are said. And that's why, again, tone and word choice or syntax is really closely related, because if I choose to say something like, well, we were talking about the kids, and he said that, you know, their world was shattered. Had instead he chose to say that their world was changed, the tone is totally different, right? Because if I said, these children's world is changed forever, well, that could be good, that could be bad. That's not that tone. There's no proof that he was meaning that their lives were ruined, right? But he said their world was shattered. Okay? Allowing us to imply if something's shattered, it is really difficult to put that together. Okay? So this is, remember, we're talking about emotional ploys here. What kind of an emotional thing is he creating? And if I say their world is shattered, that's certainly more devastating than saying their world is changed. Right? And so that's evidence of tone. And that's how we go about analyzing. So you take apart all of these little pieces and take apart the situation, the occasion, the audience, and some of the proof of this. I take those little parts and I find all the evidence, and then I go back and I report it. So you guys wrote your report or your paragraph. More information. Yeah. Let's see how you did. Who would like to share theirs?
I don't mind sharing.
Shannon, what's yours?
I remember the night President Bush gave his post-9/11 address. My family gathered around the television, fearful of what the president had to say. He confirmed what had been speculated, that the acts of the previous day were definitely terrorism. At that time, it was not known who was responsible, but it was reassuring to know that those who were responsible for kicking over the anthill were going to face the consequences. The reinforcement that the government and military were moving into action and that America was strong and united was reassuring. When the president closed his speech, the overall feeling I had was comfort. There was comfort in knowing that we would recover, that those responsible would be held accountable, and that America would unite and persevere.
Okay. So that was about emotions, and that's exactly what you do when you're looking at emotional appeal. You have to take the evidence from the piece and say, this is how it probably makes either myself feel or others agree, but it's a good. Okay? Somebody else share. Pick somebody. What do you got? Where's your pick? Here we go. Got it.
Mine was the Coach Boone's speech. I remember the Titans.
Oh, you did a different speech.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
I just don't know it, so I don't know if I could evaluate it. But go ahead.
This speech was a turning point of the movie, Remember the Titans. At this time, the team is losing interest fast and need anything to get them motivated. A long hard day of training is the perfect time to tell the boys how to get and how the coach really feels about the team. He brings them to Gettysburg, telling them the exact details of the battle. His comparison to the 50,000 young boys and men who died at this very spot, including Coach Boone's actual brother, saying it tore his family apart to how the team needs to take a lesson from the dead, is outstanding. The fact that he put his own personal experience into the speech was even more touching, but proved how he did not give up either. Boone says if we do not come together right now on this hollow ground, we will be destroyed just like they were. The biggest cause of the defeat is hatred and dislike among the team members. The definition of team is a number of people forming together for one side. Without a team, there will be no success. The coach needs everyone to come together so they will succeed.
So, I don't know that was in his brother.
That's what he said. He says
1800?
yeah, he refers to
Yeah,
brother.
1800. So I doubt it was his brother, maybe brethren, somebody who was in his family, but not brother. Okay, so, but some things that are pointed out again is that if you take each quote, an idea, and add to it, saying this is how this particular word made me feel or motivated me. So words, if you're talking about emotional appeal, you're talking about how it motivated you, how it made you feel, how it was intended to make the American people or the audience that it was intended for to feel. Okay? And that's why I think this one's easy. I think the emotional appeal is the easiest because we all have feelings and we all know what they're like. You can either be sympathetic towards the situation or apathetic towards the situation. And so I think that that's the easiest one. That's why we did it first. And today we're going to move on to some others. Does anybody else want to share?
I'd like to share mine.
Okay.
I don't know if I maybe left track or not, but that's how I felt in that moment.
Okay.
As a U.S. citizen, I feel the speech by President Bush is intended to comfort and encourage the American nation. It appeals to my emotions when it speaks about the devastating effect 9/11 had, and still has on the people that have directly and indirectly been affected by it. I feel sadness and anger when I think about how sudden and unexpectedly this terrorist attack took place. As a mother, I can't imagine how difficult this moment must have been for children who unfortunately lost a parent that day. To this day, I still think about all the lives that were lost and realize how fragile and volatile life can be. Reading President Bush's speech should leave me with a feeling of security, knowing that our country is well protected. However, the question still remains in my mind. If terrorists have succeeded once in striking our nation, how certain can we really be that it will never happen again? I feel the President's speech is intended to boost the moral welfare of the American nation and let the whole world know that his intention is to fully protect America and that he will go to great lengths to accomplish that behavior. I think his concern about what happened on 9/11 reflects in his speech. However, a feeling of insecurity about America's safety against terrorist attacks still remains in my mind.
Very good. I like that. Can I point out some words in yours that I heard? As a mother, you should relate to, I related to that because I'm a mother too, and other people are mothers. Okay. I realized how fragile and volatile life can be. Aren't those all themes? So guys, the whole thing about realizing what a universal theme is huge in analysis. You have to understand that a theme is something that every or most people experience and understand and know. It's that universal belief or code that people have and experience. Okay? So that how fragile and volatile life can be is definitely a theme. Okay? As a mother, wanting to protect a child is a theme. Okay? Yeah, and still being insecure about something. By the way, did Bush ever make any promises? He did make the promise that he was going to go after those who did this. Mm-hmm. And he did make the promise that he was going to, that they were going to do the best that they could to ensure our safety. Did he ever make a promise that this cannot happen or would not happen? He never did. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep, right? He did go after who he decided was the culprit, right? Even though it became a lot more broad than what originally is like one person, Al Qaeda or just one group, and then all of a sudden it became, hey, we're going after all terrorists. If you're harboring terrorists, it doesn't matter where they're at, we're going to go after them. So it became a lot larger endeavor that we're still fighting for. I want to read this one as well. From a different class, I asked eventually. But this one was pretty good because they hit like each transition. So in President Bush's address after the 9/11 attacks, he uses emotion to console the American citizens and portray power to the rest of the world. He starts by addressing the citizen by bringing up the mental images of the towers going down and by making a point that those everyday people had died. Then he's speaking to the world stage by saying, frighten our nation into chaos and retreat, that they have failed. When he addresses this topic so strongly, it makes me feel like no matter how hard we are hit, we will get back up and be stronger. President Bush offers sincerity and strong hand all in one by letting everyone know that this will not hurt our nation. We will take action against those who have committed these crimes of terrorism. He ends his speech with a Bible verse that for some could be offensive. In my opinion, it was more comforting. I feel that this is the best way to act after the series of events, not to be too forceful, but to be just strong enough. Okay? So I really like how she pointed out, that, some people actually might be offended by his choice of authority.
I don't think a lot of people weren't.
I don't either.
Yeah, which is weird because we're so. You think that would strike up something more.
Yeah.
People
Government.
I can't believe you say something about God.
Yeah, government.
Just assuming. I'm surprised, but I know it's it's cool that we can come together, people and just kind of be really nice people.
Well, I hate when people. I can't stand when they lose the whole. The whole sentiment of an argument because they want to argue semantics.
Yeah.
That just irritates me.
Me too.
Okay, guys, so turn those in for some credit. Okay. I expect doctoral dissertations. Just expected a paragraph. You can, or you can write it, and you know what the silent is. You guys hear something? You okay?
Yeah.
Late night.
Huh? Oh, okay. Kinda. You work nights?
Kinda.
Where do you work?
Well, I went to the computer.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're developing it.
He turned his in.
Yeah, mine's
And how about yours?
It's in there too.
Okay.
Were you gonna take roll today?
No, I didn't want anybody to be here. I wanted to stay off.
Just asking. Well, we did too, but.
I know. Darn. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on. And by the way, you guys might get lucky and actually get to hear these speeches. Unlike the last class, we had to listen to Miss Benjamin read them, which isn't anywhere near as fun as laughing at the other people. Huh?
But I love that you let them speak.
Well, you know why? It's because I try their speakers. Wherever they have sound, that didn't work.
So our college solution essays are due on Tuesday. And you didn't give those back on Tuesday. Oh, you did that one? Yeah, I thought she was actually in whatever.
Okay. Have to figure out where exactly it Okay, guys. So there are two other speeches, and there are two other appeals. So we have logical appeal, and we have ethical appeal. And so we would use the same strategy, the same soapstone strategy. So look at how we would analyze those types of speeches. So. How many of you guys are familiar with Al Gore and his basically advocating for global warming issues?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Love that.
Yeah. Okay, well he won the Nobel Prize. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for his activism towards some sort of solution. Actually, I would say more towards trying to get the rest of the world to take notice kind of thing. I don't even actually know what he really 100% did. He made the movie, obviously, and he was building awareness.
According to him, he created the internet.
I know, he did. You know that? Yeah. Okay, so, yeah, that was the first thing that came up.
Yeah. It was instead of the wrong.
Hopefully we can hear it.
Yeah, you're right, yeah. I don't know how long
It's not the.
I don't see the light.
Okay, so let's see if I can get any volume whatsoever. Okay, so if I put it in this little green one that looks exactly like this little green one, you would think it was working. Is that right?
I think so.
Should be.
If not, you guys get to listen to this one. Mute, unmute, unmute. Okay.
Is the speaker system for the computer on?
Well, that's the speaker system for that, right?
Yes.
It's all the way up, right?
Yeah.
Not on, so yes. And it's in there.
Go to make your settings or whatever.
So, where's that up here? Tools?
Tools and turn on this computer mix. Well, you know your actual like minimize the screen like on your actual desktop. There should be something that you can like. You know what I'm talking about? Like your whole like computer system that you can push.
What's an F? What number is an F? Guys who are, none of you are computer people? You don't have
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, get up.
Good man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Way to step up.
It's more fun.
Yeah, because they're just not getting power.
Oh, so the computers aren't getting power?
Yeah.
So she's missing the cord.
That's
It's like a 9-volt DC.
I know exactly where one is. But I can get it. So I think I'll have to just do it again for last. This isn't as fun. But,
Okay.
see they have this cord right here, which you would think is sound. But I'm not getting any sound out of that.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out.
Double click and move down the click.
Yeah, just to make sure that here into what should be sound. Audio.
Other speakers in the cassette.
Well, it should go up there, right?
Right, that's good. Now?
I'm so excited.
Oh, well.
I know, I was going wild.
We'll be okay. Huh? My dog is
Yeah.
All right, so we have to do it like we did the last class, which is still no big deal. The last class got through it, so. I thought I had solved it because somebody gave me speakers, but they didn't give me to bring into it. They didn't give me power cord for it, so. We'll just go back to. Malarkey. Peter Malarkey. Okay, here we go. So here is Al Gore's, see? Cover your butt. This is what you guys have to do when you work. So if you bring it on computer, if the computer doesn't work, then you bring it hard copy doesn't, so then you can still go on. You don't have to go, okay guys, go home. Right? Oh, that's probably win too. So, okay, Al Gore's Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. Understand that the occasion, or the situation, is that he has, as we said, he's an activist for basically saving our, global warming situation and saving our planet kind of thing. And the occasion is actually the day that he accepted his prize by the Norwegian Nobel Committee. Okay? And here, I'm not going to read the whole speech, like maybe a page and a half of it, because it is really long. But I'll stop every once in a while, kind of discuss how we would use these different strategies. So, go to sleep.
Sleep easy, my friend.
Okay, so here you go. Norwegian Nobel Committee, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Just in his starting his speech, who's the audience? Excellencies, Nobel. So just by how he addresses it, we already know that this isn't. He can't use dudes and y'all and words like that. He's going to be a little bit more eloquent and elevated in his syntax, isn't he? Okay? And excellencies mean that there are people with some sort of titles, such as maybe Nobel or nobleman, or maybe the king and queen. Those types of people would be in this audience. Okay? I have a purpose here today. It is a purpose I have tried to serve for many years. I have prayed to God to show me a way to accomplish it. Sometimes, without warning, the future knocks on our door with a precious and painful vision of what might be. 119 years ago, a wealthy inventor read his own obituary, mistakenly published years before his death. Wrongly believing the inventor had just died, a newspaper printed a harsh judgment of his life's work, unfairly labeling him the merchant of death because of his invention. Dynamite. Shaken by his condemnation, the inventor made a fateful choice to serve the cause of peace. 7 years later, Alfred Nobel created this prize, and the others that bear his name. The Nobel Peace Prize, invented by the inventor of dynamite. 7 years ago tomorrow, I read my own political obituary. What happened 7 years prior to that?
He lost his bid for candidacy.
He lost his bid for candidacy. He had won the popular vote, And then he committed political suicide by whining about it for I don't know however long, and would not give up the fact that he did not win the electoral votes. Okay? And that behavior basically was political suicide for him. Okay, and so he's acknowledging that. So 7 years ago tomorrow, I read my own political obituary, a judgment that seemed to be harsh and mistaken, if not premature. But that unwelcome verdict also brought a precious, if painful gift, an opportunity to serve for fresh, new ways to serve my purpose. Unexpectedly, that quest has brought me here. Even though I fear my words cannot match this moment, I pray that I am feeling in my heart, or what I am feeling in my heart will be communicated clearly enough to those that will hear me say, we must act. So, already I can fill out purpose. What was his purpose? Acceptance of the Nobel speech, but also that call to action. We must act. We need to do something. Okay? His tone here, is it a lofty tone? Does he act like he's over everybody? Look at me, I won a prize. Was he like that? How was his tone?
As a servant.
As
To
a
his
servant?
cause. Yeah.
So he was humble. So he had a very tone of humility, right? In what he was saying. He even was humble enough to say, I committed political suicide, which is something that people a lot of times will not admit. Okay? And he did. And he said, and had that not happened, I might not be standing here today in order to do what I'm doing, because I had a different purpose. I just didn't know it back then. So very humble in the way that he's approaching this. And I would think that anybody who was given, I don't know how much money they get, but it's millions.
Well, I was going to say it's at least $500,000.
Something like that. I think it's $1 million or $500,000.
It's not a small amount. It's
that they get as a prize. So. Okay. The distinguished scientists with whom it is greatest honor of my life to share this award have laid before us a choice between two different futures. A choice that to my ears echoes the words of an ancient prophet. Life or death, blessing or curses, therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. We, the human species, are confronted a planetary emergency, a threat to survival of our civilization that is gathering ominous and destructive potential even as we gather here. But there is hopeful news as well. We have the ability to solve this crisis and to avoid the worst, though not all, of its consequences, if we act boldly, decisively, and quickly. Okay, again, if we're actually analyzing this, and you guys only get to hear it, you don't get to actually see the words here, but he's saying words like planetary emergency. So it's not just localized. He's looking at the global view of things. And he says we have the potential to act, but we have to do it boldly, decisively, and quickly. You can't just sit around and keep discussing it. You have to actually do something. Okay? And so those are things that you can take out and say, there's a sense of immediacy in his voice and his tone. That he's acting on a global scale. He's wanting everybody to participate, not just America. It's not America's problem. However, despite a great number of honorable exceptions, too many of the world's leaders are still best described in the words of Winston Churchill. Applied to those who ignored Adolf Hitler's threat, and I quote, they go on in strange paradox, decide only to be undecided, resolve to be irresolute, adamant for drift, solid for fluidity, all powerful to be impotent. So our charge here was that we are trying to look for evidence of what? What appeal?
Well, that would be logical.
Logical appeal. If I'm appealing to logic, he is using borrowed credibility of somebody who is well respected. Okay? Had he said in the words of, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which you still know, but you don't know what the heck he would have to do with global warming or any kind of political thinking, he's a basketball great, right? He can say that, and yeah, that's borrowed credibility, but then everybody's going to go, why did he put him? He doesn't have any reason to be talking about here, right? But he picked somebody who was widely respected for his political beliefs and for his action in World War II, right? And so that lends to the credibility and the logical argument, okay? And so if you guys are analyzing, that would be something you say. By choosing such a important figure, such an important political figure, that borrowed credibility lends to his, logical argument. Okay? So today we dumped over 70 million tons of global warming pollution into the thin shell of an atmosphere surrounding our planet as if it were a sewer. And tomorrow we'll dump a slightly larger amount, with the cumulative concentrations now trapping more and more heat from the sun. Well, that's an interesting way of saying we're polluting, we're emitting too many gases. He doesn't say we're emitting a lot of gas into the air. He says that we're surrounding the planet as if it were an open sewer. That's certainly a huge appeal, right? And it's a logical appeal. We're just dumping stuff into our atmosphere like we would just flush the toilet. Okay? As a result, the Earth has a fever, and the fever is rising. The experts have told us that it is not a passing affliction that will heal by itself. And as for a second opinion, and a third, and a fourth, and the consistent conclusion, restated and increasingly distressed, that there is something basic wrong. We are what is wrong, and we must make it right. Okay? So, I like the illusion, not necessarily illusion, I like the metaphor of the Earth has a fever, or that we have a fever, and that so far we have done nothing to try to relieve the fever. That's kind of interesting. Okay? Then I just have like 2 more paragraphs that I wanted to read. Okay. Last September 21st, as the northern hemisphere tilted away from the sun, scientists reported with unprecedented alarm that the North Polar ice cap is, in their words, falling off a cliff. One study estimated they could be completely gone during the summer in less than 22 years, and another, newer study, to be presented by U.S. Navy researchers later this week, warns that it could happen as little as 7 years. 7 years from now. The funny thing is now it's been about that many years, right? Mm-hmm. And what's happened?
Well, it hasn't fallen off completely, but we're not doing it any good.
There's been
but
some
it's still
change,
there.
but not a lot.
Yeah.
In the last few months, it's been harder and harder to misinterpret the signs that our world is spinning out of filter. Major cities in North and South America, Asia, and Australia are nearly out of water due to massive droughts and melting glaciers. Despite farmers planning evacuations of places that they have long called home, unprecedented wildfires have forced 500,000 people from their homes in the country and caused a national emergency that almost brought down a government in another. Climate refugees have migrated into areas inhabited by other people with different cultures, religions, and traditions, increasing the potential for conflict. Stronger storms in the Atlantic and the Pacific had threatened our whole cities. Yakety smack, all these things that supposedly happen. So all of these are appeals that he's giving to people. I really like the one where he says climate refugees, in other words, it's people who are being affected by this climate, migrated into areas inhabited by other people. And these other people have different cultures and different ideas and different ethics, and therefore we could have problems with fighting. And remember I told you that we're going to start looking at fallacies in argumentation? Well, what he's offering there is a cause and effect. The cause is this drought, the effect is that people are fighting. And that's not necessarily the true effect, right? That would be like saying, because I jump like this, and China had an earthquake right at that second, that I caused the earthquake in China. Okay? That's really kind of what he said. Yes, these people are migrating into different areas, and, you know, those types of things, but I don't know if the cause and effect is truly a legitimate argument. Okay? It's a stretch. But, something that we haven't done here is we haven't looked at, when you're kind of looking at occasion and situation. This isn't only an acceptance speech, but this was something political for him. And do you think, what does he have to stand to gain, other than winning the Nobel Peace Prize?
Support for his ideas.
Well, here you go.
Oh, that's true.
He still wants to be a political figure, right? But not only that, but in order to be a businessman, a political figure, things that you have to do is you have to create commerce and business. With this idea, with this global warming idea, and yeah, it's a grandiose idea. I would love to solve the problem of global warming. But what else has he done? He's created industry with this. If I prove to the nation that we have to get alternative fuel sources, he just created a huge industry, just like he created the internet. Okay? But you see what I'm saying? There's an agenda to what he was doing. Creating different, hey, I know as this political person who is trying to win the presidency that I need to create jobs in the United States in order to be liked. So how am I going to create jobs? Make a new sector of jobs. How am I going to get people to create alternative fuel sources? How am I going to get people to stop using corn and subsidizing corn? I don't want them to subsidize corn anymore. Oh, I can tell them that they could use corn in cars. Okay? So all of this has an agenda that goes beyond the speech, and a lot of that's implied. And so when you're analyzing, you have to have those ideas in the back of your head. Okay? So if I ask you guys to give a paragraph now saying, as an audience member, if you were an audience member listening to this speech, what were the things that really affected you, positive or negative? What were some of the things that kind of caught your eye and made you think, yeah, this guy's legitimate, this guy's stretching, or whatever?
That fever situation that you're talking about?
Yeah.
What if I don't believe in global warming? I think I understand, but to me it's like, well,
And why don't you believe and understand? Why don't you believe in global warming?
because I don't, it's climate change.
See,
You know what I mean?
he never offers the alternative argument, which is what a lot of scientists are saying. And the alternative argument is there's no precedent for the alternative argument. So remember when I told you that logic, when you're talking about logical appeals, one of the biggest things is precedent. And not necessarily just lawful precedent, but we've never had a situation where our sun has had sunspots in a certain way, or where we went into that lull. They can look in the past, but it's been thousands and thousands of years and nobody was alive then, so they can only speculate, they can only have theories, right? And for it to occur again, we're probably going to not be as a species at the time, because it'll probably take thousands and thousands of years for that cycle to occur. And so there's no precedent set that says, well, there's an alternative explanation for this. And it's not necessarily that we're pouring sewage into the atmosphere. It's not necessarily because, or what have you. And then he said, 7 years, we're probably going to lose all of these things. It's been about that long, and tip of the iceberg is dropping off, and we do certainly have problems, and so maybe there was a different agenda, but there's really no way to know. We can't 100%. It's just argument.
Yeah.
And that's why we call it rhetoric. You see why we call it rhetoric? Because there's no true answer. We can sit here and say, the guy's a schmuck, he's a whiner, he's a this, or you can say the guy's brilliant, and he's a this, and he won a Nobel Prize, and obviously people appreciate and believe in his, the validity of his argument. So there's always two parts or more. There's always several aspects to this. And so whoever's argument is stronger is the person who's going to win the political debate. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're right. It just means more people are following them at the time, based on the evidence.
Now, there was really a overwhelming consensus among these people. But we see it like here in Colorado Springs because from what I was told, Colorado Springs was really different before.
Well, we're still considered a high desert.
Well, we got no water when we used to in the past. Although we are considered to be in drought.
I'm not a weather expert. The only thing I can say is that as a kid, it used to snow more.
It did.
And
It used to snow a lot more.
Yeah.
It used to snow a lot more than it does now.
96.
Yeah. Well, it used to snow a lot more when I was a kid, and I've noticed that the weather patterns have shifted about 2 to 3 months from when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And I do see each year that it shifts between 4 and 8 days. It used to be that we didn't get our first snow until October 31st. Today is the 25th.
It's so yesterday, so it's just
Okay, so 8 to 10 days, and I've kind of been paying attention as an adult the last 6 to 8 years when things snow, what happens, and I have noticed a significant shift of even when my vegetables and fruits come out on the trees and things like that. Yep. So you guys get the idea of how you can use these tools to kind of go through and show proof of audience awareness. He was obviously aware of his audience. He wasn't above anybody. He was very humble in the things that he said. His purpose was he wanted to provoke action, but he also wanted to be, humble enough to say, yeah, I'm deserving of this award. I don't think of any, of course nobody's going to say, yes, of course I deserve this award, thank you, or, whatever. They're going to say, maybe other people could have been considered, but I'm so glad you considered me. What's that called when you're that way? It is called humble. Is there something else?
Yeah.
You know what
I
I'm
know what you're
talking
talking about.
about? So, anyway, now I'm going to shift to the very last one. Totally, so that's how you might introduce or work on logical. Borrowed credibility. Did they use credible sources? Did they establish their own credibility? One thing is, he obviously knew his topic. Okay. In the next few sentences, he talks about that the gases that are going out into the atmosphere, the CO2 gases, are colorless and odorless, and because it can't be colorless and odorless and hard to detect, out of sight, out of mind, therefore people don't think that they need to do anything about it. And so that I thought was a pretty interesting appeal. And I thought it was also ominous that the name of his movie was something kind of like that. It wasn't out of sight, out of mind. It was The Inconvenient Truth.
Did you do like the works cited to show what you're reading or?
No, it was one specific speech. Not unless you went and researched that person. Yeah. This kind of analysis doesn't require extended research, other than if you wanted to research the people. Like he also says, my teachers, and then he lists the teachers' names, and if you didn't know who that was, you'd have to research who they were and see if they were credible sources. Okay, the last appeal that you would have to analyze would be we had ethos, logos, ethics, okay? The ethical appeals and how you go about looking at it. And I told you that in looking at ethics that we have to look at what our society accepts, what our class systems accept, what our smaller communities accept. So, for example, they would accept different behavior, say in the South, than in the South than maybe they might here in the Northwest regions or West regions. Okay, so ethics can be regional. Ethics can change. Morals cannot. Okay, and ethics change like for example, if we were talking about ethical appeals in Bush's speech, we could say his ethics was eye for an eye. Morally, we shouldn't kill people, and you're terrorists, and you're killing people, but now that you killed us, we can justify retribution, right? So that's our ethics as a culture, is we do believe in retribution and eye for an eye, okay? Another culture might not. Certain Indian cultures, for example, it's fine to sacrifice. You know, let's sacrifice this virgin to the gods, and other cultures are, absolutely not. So ethics change, morals don't. So this is Maya Angelou, and she is giving a eulogy at the funeral service for Coretta Scott King. Okay. Now Maya Angelou is she's a well-respected author and also an activist. She was civil rights activist. She was also a poet. And Coretta Scott King is. Oh, who's Coretta Scott King? Who is he? Martin Luther King's wife. Okay, so Martin Luther King's wife, who passed away, Maya Angelou is delivering the eulogy for this. And one thing is you should know what a eulogy is. The word eulogy really means a good word. Okay, so administering a good word about the deceased is why we give a eulogy. Which I think is funny that when, sometimes people who've been wronged by their parents or something, they're like, my dad was a really hard guy, but it made me who I was. And it was like, not really a good word for a father, but okay. Okay. Anyway, so there's a song that opens up and it says, I open my mouth to the Lord and I won't turn back, no, I won't go. I shall go. I see what is the end. I see what the end is going to be. Then her speech starts. It's in the midst of national tumult, in the medium of international violent uproar, Coretta Scott King's face remained and then there's a blank, I do not know why, in serenity. In times of interior violent storm, she sat, her hands resting in her lap calmly, like good children sleeping. Her passion was never spent in public display. She offered her industry and her energies to action towards righting ancient and current wrongs in this world. So I'm going to stop there. She starts off and she's saying, these are violent times. Okay? Ms. King's lived through her husband's activism, having, Dr. King also worked for school and working in reforming schools, working to help for the equal rights and that sort of thing. And then she tells everybody that his wife, never spent time on public display. She offered her industry and her energies to action towards righting ancient and current wrongs in the world. So of course, you know that she's alluding. Remember the word, you know what allusion is? She's alluding to her husband. Okay? Now, that is something I should bring up. Is when you're looking at ethical analysis, a lot of times you will see a lot of allusion to either other works or other people. Because they want to bring that credibility and show that, it's kind of like the logical appeal, show that I am credible because I know the situation as well. Okay? And so alluding to the time of Dr. King, is that she understands the plight that this lady went through. Okay? She believed religiously in nonviolent protests. She believed it could heal a nation mired in a history of slavery and excesses. She believed not violent protests nonviolent protest religiously, could lift up a nation rife in racial prejudices and racial bias. She was a quintessential African American woman born in a small town representative South, born of flesh and destined to become born a cornflower and destined to become a steel magnolia. Word choice. She didn't say she was born a poor woman. She didn't say she was born a pauper. She said she was born a cornflower who was destined to become a steel magnolia. Now, who knows what a magnolia is? It's a flower in the South. And when you call it a steel magnolia, what's the connotation there? That it's indestructible, yeah. So the show Steel Magnolias is about women who are so prudent, so able to just withstand the situations that they're going through. They are indestructible, right? Like that Steel Magnolias that will come back every single year and be just even more and more beautiful every single year. And so those words were chosen specifically. From becoming a cornflower to a steel magnolia. First of all, she definitely shows that she knows her audience, that she's down in the South. But second, she's showing that going from being not so strong, cornflower, being ordinary. Cornflower is a strong tree or strong plant, but it's ordinary. Cornflowers grow all over the South. Steel magnolias, on the other hand, they're like rare and beautiful and important. Okay? She loved her church fervently. She loved and adored her husband and her children. She cherished her race and cherished women. She cared for the conditions of human beings and Native Americans and Latins and Latinos and Asian Americans. She cared for the gay and straight people. And she was concerned for the struggles in Ireland. And she prayed nightly for the Palestine and equally for Israel. So she's pointing out that she's not the same kind of person that's just for my people. I want equal rights, but really what I want is rights for the blacks. She wanted everybody to be important. I like this. This is my favorite as far as syntax. I speak as a sister of a sister. And she said it just like that, by the way, if you were listening. I speak as a sister of a sister. Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated on my birthday. And for over 30 years, Coretta Scott King and I have telephoned or sent cards to each other, or flowers to each other, or met each other somewhere in the world. We called ourselves chosen sisters. And we would travel to the South of America or to the Caribbean. And when she came to visit me in North Carolina or in New York, we sat into late evening hours calling each other girl. That's a black woman thing, you know. And even when we reached into our 70th decade, we still said, girl. I stand here today before a family, which is my family. And for my family and all the other families in the world who wanted to be here, but could not be here. I have beside me up here millions of people who are living and standing straight and erect and knowing something about dignity, about being cold and aloof, knowing something about being contained without being unapproachable. People who have learned something about Coretta Scott King. Okay? You gotta read it like that. That's how she said it. You can just see that syntax, that verisimilitude coming out in her character here. Because if you know anything about Maya Angelou, when she actually speaks and reads her poetry, she's very, very astute. And she is one of those steel magnolias she talked about. She's very bright, and she usually has a very elevated syntax. Okay? And this is a sister of a sister. Totally bring herself to that family. And, coming down to say, we are normal and we love each other. And she says, we are family here. Then she talks about them singing and that she was one of the few people who allowed Coretta Scott King the opportunity to just laugh. And Martin Luther King used to complain that his wife didn't laugh enough. And she says, but when she was with me, we laughed. We laughed for a long time, kind of thing. So it kind of went through that. But then the last few words of the eulogy, I pledge to you, my sister, I will never cease. I mean to say that I see a better world. I mean to say that I see someplace, somewhere. I mean to say I want to see some honesty, some fair play. I want to see kindness and justice. This is what I want to see, and when I want to see it through my eyes and through your eyes, Praise God King. And then a song. Now, notice, as far as tone, she never broke down. She never cried. Okay, because Martin, and alluding to Martin Luther King, will tell you the same thing. Martin Luther King would have never heard, my people are hurting. People were dying because of his cause, right in the streets. And he was still standing strong. And she knew that if she came up here, that she would have given a eulogy. My sister is gone. We're all lost. No. She gave that eulogy saying, we're going to move on because I am going to see it through. That those things that you stood for, I also stand for. And that we're going to continue this fight. So it was a different tone and a different manner. It showed the ethics. It showed the ethical appeal of Maya Angelou. Okay? Because she truly believed in those rights too. It wouldn't be very ethical for somebody to say, yeah, you're an activist, but yeah, we give it up now because you're gone. Right? You stood for all of this. We don't know how to move on. No, she's saying, hey, you're a strong lady, I'm going to continue to be a strong lady. Okay? So, guys, you can find all of these transcripts online. There is a speech database, much like that movie database. There's a speech database that you can find hundreds and hundreds of speeches on. I'm not assigning it yet because I still want to go through the fallacies, but we will be writing a analysis, okay, a rhetorical analysis of, and you get to choose the product of what you want to do it from. You could choose, for example, a speech, any of these types of speeches. It could be also a monologue from a movie or something to that effect, like you did. Or it doesn't have to necessarily be a monologue, it could be the whole movie. I was talking to my last group about, I have a particular movie that I just love, that I think hit all three of the ethical, the emotional, and the logical appeal. It's my favorite movie in the world, absolutely, bar none, and that's The Fisher King. And the premise of the movie, and I'll let you guys go, the premise of the movie, actually, I have one going. The premise of the movie is that there is this, what is it, he's a personality that's on the radio, and he is really, really well liked, okay? And he's just like, he's a shock jock. So if he says bad stuff, people are like, oh yeah, right? And so this guy keeps on calling in, and when people would call in, you know, he'd say shocking things, and as soon as they hang up, then he would diss on them, right? For what they said, oh, what an idiot, da, da, da. Well, this one guy kept calling in, and he started giving him advice. Oh, those people are so bad to you. You should, it serves them right. You should do something about it, you know, kind of thing. And pretty soon, the guy that he kept talking to starts taking his advice as, yeah, I really should. And he's basically mocked this guy into doing something really bad. So the guy goes out and shoots up his bar. Okay. After he shoots up the bar, what do you think the shock jock did? What was his? What would you do if you've been caught something like this, or you felt that you had caught something like this, right? And so, you know, his ethics were really, really low. He was, you know, and then all of a sudden, this life-changing event happens, and he has to live through it. Okay, and so then there's, obviously, as I say, I don't want to give it away, but there's logical appeal and different things. He ends up meeting one of the survivors of the ordeal, and has to basically live through what happened between the two of them. And so it is a perfect example of being able to, you could analyze this film. So you can analyze an entire film, you can analyze a monologue, you can analyze a commercial. Like, what kind of emotional appeal does Axe My Balls commercial, which I just saw yesterday, and I was like, oh my gosh, Okay, and okay, the emotional might be like this sex appeal, but then what's the logic behind that? Well, sales obviously, but then, is it ethical to do that? Okay, so you could do a commercial. So start thinking about what you could do. As I said, like you could do the, you could do some of the other, I figured out it was Brett Favre who was taking the pictures of his junk and afterward had to apologize to everybody and back pedal. That would be a good speech for you guys who like those types of things. So there's tons and tons of information out there that you could analyze. You just have to choose it. Okay? So start thinking about that. Try to be unique. I absolutely will say you may not choose Gettysburg Address. You may not choose Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. You may not choose, any of those already analyzed to the nth degree speeches, because then you don't have to work to it. Okay? You just rehash what other people have done. Okay, guys? So start thinking about it. As I said, it's not an assignment. And let me give out your papers here. And your homework is that you have to rewrite, finish this up. Anyway. Who's in? Shannon. So this is your only homework, actually. Kim. Yay. And Kelly, right? Brian? Not here today? Daniel? Elliot? Matt T, not here today? And Annie? Brian D, not here today? Did you turn one in? How can you not know if you didn't turn one in? Okay, could you just check? Obviously you didn't because I haven't really addressed. Could you please give that to me? Okay. If you want to wait for 5 minutes. Oh.
I've seen that before.
This was your, final cut. This is your final copy.
Yeah, that's
right?
what I thought. Yeah.
Final of the
I think it's
your contrast.
Yeah.
You guys can go.